All right, welcome to another Social Selling Hour. Today is September 15th. We are Social Selling Hour number 18, and we are thankful again. We keep getting a great lineup of guests, and it's the string is continuing. So I don't know who's on the docket for next week, but they're going to have a tough bill to follow. But Rachel and I are here again. Brian Fanzo, iSocial Fans, Chief Digital Strategist at Broadsuite.
Hey everyone, Rachel Miller, Chief Listener at Pipeliner CRM.
And we are happy to have Tim McDonald with us today from BTC Life, No Kid Hungry, previously Huffington Post and others. So Tim, welcome to the show. Give us a little background about yourself.
Yeah, no, thank you both, Rachel and Ryan, for inviting me on today. As you said, I'm Tim McDonald. I work at Be the Change Revolutions, and I have the honor of working on the No Kid Hungry account where we help to end childhood hunger here in the U.S. And I also am the co-founder of Creating Is, which is reimagining leadership with Ayala Barron. And so we have a nice project that we're starting there called Stories.nyc, which is stories from the streets and taking homeless people off the streets and helping reinvest into the solution.
Oh, that's great. I'm a big fan. I've been a big fan for a long while, and I was really glad that you were able to jump on. And I know we talk a lot about community and relationships, and a lot about a lot of the things I end up quoting or citing are things even from CMGR Hangout or some of the other ventures that you've had in the recent time. And I think that's kind of works perfectly for the social selling audience that we kind of have today, because we talk a lot about content, talk a lot about the sales cycle, and kind of how you get people to collaborate and build sessions that actually are making a difference. So this is the kind of a perfect topic from that. So we'll jump into question one. So what are the main differences between relationships, networks, and communities? And I think this is a good one just to kind of start us down on the path of what we're going to kind of focus on for the next hour or so.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely, and it's when you were just describing that you take so much of what I say. I think one of the things about this whole talk that really got me was a sketch that I did on the difference between networks and communities about a year ago that you actually asked if you could use in one of your posts not too long ago as kind of the basis of this whole conversation that we're talking about. So really excited to be part of this. But I think if I can really sum it up, I don't think there's not a difference between relationships, networks, and communities. There's a difference between networks and communities. Relationships are really just the connections that exist in both of those things. And the difference between networks and communities is really how those connections are formed. In networks, it's all based upon kind of this node principle, right, where you have to be connected to another person in order to be connected to that other person. In a community, we all come together for a common purpose, so we don't have to be connected to anybody else. We just need to be connected to the purpose of why we're coming there. And I think that's the real distinction for me between networks and communities, but relationships exist within both of those ecosystems.
So I think that's like a perfect summary and way to kind of bridge it together too. Because important that we often talk about building your network or your people. Are you guys getting feedback?
Yes, echo.
Echo.
I will try and mute myself then because I'm on headphones, but it might be me.
Okay. Sorry about that. But yeah,
Interesting.
I think the difference when we talk, building your network or growing your community, a lot of times we can always bring up relationships and the importance of relationships, but linking those relationships and turning them into a community is a lot different than just building a network. And I think that was a lot of what you've always kind of focused on. It was something that opened my eyes. I remember when you kind of talked about passion and purpose and how those kind of fall into more of the community side. I don't know if you can just expand on that a little bit more as far as how the purpose kind of fits into building the communities versus networks.
Well, yeah, I think I think real easily I equate the networks as far as it's more about who you know rather than why you're there or what you know. And so in a community, the purpose really defines why we're there, why we are coming together. We don't have to already know each other to know that we're both here for the same reasons. And that purpose is what really drives us to do what we do, to be passionate about what we're passionate about, to want to be interested and connect with other people for those reasons. And when we're talking about networks, and I'm not saying, I mean, I talk so much people automatically think I'm anti-network. I am not anti-network. I just think they have two different benefits and two different ways of looking at it. I'm much more the person who loves what a community has to offer as opposed to a network. Because in a network, it's all about kind of playing the game, right? Who can I know? Who do I know that knows this person so that I can leverage that connection to make this? The problem with that, though, is if you're thinking about, point A connected to point C, point A can only be connected to point C if you go through point B. And as soon as you start taking those connections out, like if that person leaves your network, right, now all of a sudden the relationship that you have between A and C is weakened or it disappears completely. And the thing about a community is you don't have that. The purpose keeps you bonded together in a way that it doesn't matter who's there, who leaves, who comes, the purpose still exists and keeps you connected.
So along those lines, so networks are for leveraging relationships. Why should a person or a brand strive to build a community?
Oh, I love this, and I just had to kind of talk about the question a little bit first because I really feel like we don't build communities. We actually have communities existing all the time. But what I do think is important is, and this is where it comes into business, how you actually unite those to take action and to do something that you want them to do. And I think that for me is kind of the real critical area that we're looking at is as far as we all need to keep the community in mind, but it's not how you build that because they're already there. They're already talking about our brand. They're already talking about us. We just need to find a way to ignite them to take certain actions that we want to see happen. And that is much easier said than done. It takes a lot of work and a lot of patience, but it's all about really kind of making sure that you collect everybody in a community, make them feel like they're part of it, and give them the right information, the right resources so that when you need something to happen, you don't have to go out and make sure that they're there. They're already there, and they already know what you want them to say. They already know what information and where to go get it is because you've nurtured and built this community from a standpoint of identifying them, connecting them with the information and the people that they need to be connected with.
No, I think that's great. I think that's often we get the oh, wait till you mute real quick. Oh, there we go. All right, so I think the big thing oftentimes what happens is people get overwhelmed because they feel like they have to build their own community from scratch, or they think of the task as being monumental, especially in the in the brand versus customer community concept, where I think that's a great takeaway just from the first 15 minutes or 10 minutes of the chat is that it's about empowering and utilizing the communities that already exist. I think that's not a discussion that's often talked about. It's talking about the importance of relationships and communities, but we often think about it is if you don't have one or you're not sure of one, you have to grow it from scratch. And really, they already exist, you just don't know where. And the key kind of is kind of looking there. Like when you think of that angle, what do you recommend when it says, okay, we don't know where our communities are that we're trying to kind of reach out to?
Well, it's funny. I think I wrote a post once about what my uncle taught me about building communities, and I did use the phrase building communities, but it was really about growing communities. And he was a fisherman, and he always took me fishing as a kid. And if we'd go to the one spot that was ideal, right? This is what we're thinking. Oh, here's where our ideal community members are. Here's where we're going to get the biggest bang for our buck. And it's the same thing when you're fishing. This time of day, the tide's at this level, the winds are blowing it this way. The water color is this. We're going to be more apt to catch more fish right here. But the lesson I learned from him was, regardless of what the signals of nature were telling us and what wisdom was telling us, is you need to listen to what the fish are telling you. If they're not biting there, you need to go to a different part of the lake, a different part of the sea, in order to see if you can catch fish there. And it's the same thing when we grow our communities. We really need to put a lot of different lines in the water at different places and test and see what works where and who we resonate with the best. and it's not going to always stay constant. And that's where, that's why this is a job and not just something that you could just jump in and do on occasion, is because it's constantly evolving and changing.
No, I think that's a valid point as well. When we think about the idea of, evolving and changing, which means we have to have an agile strategy enough to be able to know where they're at, but also know what you don't know. I love the idea of testing and tweaking and throwing out the lines to, kind of see what's out there, because I think that's important. So I think we'll jump into question 3. So we have question 3. As a community leader, how can you encourage members to interact?
This is my favorite question because it's so simple and yet most people don't do it. It's introducing the community members to each other. It's really that simple. It doesn't take a lot of work, a lot of effort, and once your community gets to a certain size, what's even better about this is you can start having community members introduce new members that come in, so that you're not having to be the one doing that. I always say, as a community manager's job, and I think we all, in a sense, are community managers. Every employee within an organization plays the role of a community manager to a certain extent. You might not manage the social channels for the brand, but you're interacting with your customers. And so imagine if you're talking to your customers in your community, and before you even get like the response in your forum or your community that you've set up, somebody else from your community is already answering that question, is already welcoming somebody that's mentioning your brand or organization for the first time, and connecting them with some other people in the community. Making introductions is the key to making a successful community.
So it could be a dumb question. So do communities have singular leaders, or is it a multifaceted approach? So it seems like there would be several for a successful community.
Yeah, I do not like the term leader in this sense at all in a community, because I think it needs to be very flat to be successful, but you do need somebody that is, as I like to say, the conduit of the information. So who can you go to who knows this? Who can you go to that knows the right person to talk to? Who can you go to that knows the person that I need to talk to about this? Those are the type of hierarchy I think that you have as far as leadership models in a community, but it's not a hierarchical thing where this person leads the community. You have everybody within the community on a very level playing field, but they just know the right people to go and talk to, and they know the right people that can direct them. And a community manager's role is being a conduit, because you're being the voice of the consumer to the brand, and the voice of the brand back to the consumer. You are not being the end all of being the gatekeeper for that, but you are being the one that allows that communication to happen.
Okay, so that's kind of a nice lead into question 4. So the leaders of the community, what role does sharing quality content play in engaging the community?
Yeah, well, I mean, the whole thing about your community, and this is one thing that I've learned, when I was at Huffington Post, and obviously before that, and especially now in the work that we do with No Kid Hungry, is, if you don't get your word out there, if you don't put your purpose and your message out there and your story out there for people to hear, how are you ever going to make more people aware that might already want to be part of your community but don't know you exist? And so creating content is a way to get people aware of you and what you're doing out in the world, and welcome them to become part of your community, because community should not be this thing that has a high barrier of entry. It should be a free-flowing kind of system. There might be some kind of barrier to get into it, but it's not that you need to pay a certain amount of money or have this kind of birthright. It's a matter of you need to demonstrate and prove your interest to the community, and you're there for the good purpose, and then you can be welcomed to the community. And content is a way to invite those people that might not already know about you to get into.
No, I think that's a great point. I think so. One of the questions on some action going on Twitter's side, and the word trust has been thrown around, I think, a lot when we talk content, telling your story, engaging, building relationships. And when we think of trust in a community, not only from a leadership to the community, the people in the community, but also as a whole, I always think of one of the big differences in trust from a network versus a community is a community is about trusting each other as a whole, and everyone's kind of working towards that one common goal and one common purpose, where a network often is that links of trust, and I think we've had a couple of comments on trust. Where do you think trust plays in how we use content and the community as a whole?
Yeah, well, I want to be very careful here because content does not develop trust. Content provides the opportunity for somebody to form a relationship with you that you can start building trust. But trust does not occur based upon the content that you share. You can become trusted source for this content, but the content that you're actually sharing isn't trusted by itself, if that makes sense. And I think that's a very important distinction because too many people think that just by sharing content is the way that we build trust, and that is not how it happens. It's by the relationships and the effort that we put into the one-to-one connections that we make with people that builds trust over time.
No, I think that's essential. I think, and actually, I think part of the issue being content overload, or the idea that we're just, there's so much content out there, and it's not the amount of content. It's really what's the value of that content. And I use the term upcycling because if you have one piece of great content that tells the story and builds that trust, upcycling that across your network to multiple people is way better than 50 pieces of average content that doesn't really tell your story or establish that trust. I think that's a big part on that side.
If I can just put this very simply,
Sure.
I've never heard anybody say that they do business with content. They do business with people.
Great. Yeah, I think actually for a quote from Twitter, Kristen says that content is a catalyst for conversations. I think that's a great way of summing it up. You're getting your foot in the door, getting their attention with your content.
Perfect, yep.
So we're going to jump into question 5 there, and as a big fan of Team No Kid Hungry, this is a great question for, I think more people that we have kind of empowering and using and understanding the fight that you are working on, I think also kind of conveys on the importance of community. So question 5, you're very active as a No Kid Hungry supporter. Please share a little bit about the organization and kind of your involvement in that and what we can do since September is kind of Team No Kid Hungry month.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, right now I actually oversee the strategy and the execution on a lot of the social strategies for No Kid Hungry with Be the Change Revolutions. But before that, I was, and I still am, an active member of the Social Council for No Kid Hungry, which is just a group of volunteers that all put in our personal time and effort on blogs, on digital channels, on social media to really help spread the word about No Kid Hungry. And what No Kid Hungry is it's a campaign of Share Our Strength, which is a nonprofit organization, that its aim is to end childhood hunger in the U.S. Most people aren't aware, but 1 in 5 kids, that's 16 million children, face hunger every single day. And these are kids that you wouldn't necessarily think of. It's easy for us to think, and it's probably more concentrated in some urban areas, in some poorer neighborhoods, but this happens in every neighborhood. If you think 1 in 5 kids, somebody that your kids are going to school with, is facing a hunger issue. And so what we're doing is not looking to put a Band-Aid on this. We're not looking just to, to put a good story or a smile on it. We are actually looking to end child hunger in the U.S. And the best part about this is it is achievable, it is obtainable. The money is there to make it happen. It's just a matter of getting states and organizations educated and in line in the best way that we can do that with the existing resources that we have. And and this month, I almost forgot about that. I got so thrilled with telling you about No Kid Hungry. This month is one of our biggest months. It's called Dine Out for No Kid Hungry, and the easiest way to do this is you just do good by dining out. And if you just go to nokidhungry.org, look on the site. You can put in your address. There's even a text number that you can send it to, and it figures out where you're texting from and gives you the locations. But any participating restaurant in the Dine Out program, when you go and eat there, you can either make a small donation to get a free product or a coupon for your next visit, or they might donate a certain portion of your purchase to No Kid Hungry. So each participating restaurant has a different promotion, but all of them end up helping No Kid Hungry during this month. And so it's a great way to go out and enjoy some food, something that most of us do all the time anyway, but at the same time we're doing good because money is going to No Kid Hungry and helping feed hungry kids.
Yeah, you can't argue about that for sure. And my wife was laughing. She said, "Wait, this gives us an excuse to want to eat out." I mean, I don't think any of us mind that excuse. And we were looking for a breakfast place, and there wasn't a Denny's close, but we ended up getting a Denny's T-shirt and contributing that way as well. So I think it's neat. I like the idea that there's so many different aspects and ways to kind of get involved. I think that's a true a testament to how you guys have kind of built the program, because it's oftentimes everyone's like, well, it's not for me, it's not in my area, it's not in my region, and having the interactive map and typing in your address and seeing what your options are is really, that's really a great way of kind of empowering the community and getting everybody kind of involved.
Yeah, you guys, can you tell everyone a little bit more about the Twitter campaign you ran? I think it was last week. I think it was hugely successful, and that's the perfect example of how to leverage your community.
Well, yeah, last week on Tuesday, September 9th, we held our, it's a tweet-a-thon. We call it the Tweet Out, T-W-E-A-T out, because it's promoting the dine out, so eating out. And in a 24-hour period, what we do is we gather around Twitter to really raise awareness that Dine Out Month is going on for No Kid Hungry in September. And we just get as many people as we can to start talking and promoting this cause. And last year we had a reach of 19 million. Our goal was 16 million. We actually reached 19 million. This year our goal was to have a reach of 50 million, and we ended up getting over 51 million in reach. So it was hugely successful. This is all organic, and for those of you not in marketing or not familiar with what reach is, if I have 17,000 followers on Twitter, it doesn't matter if I tweet once or 100 times, my reach is 17,000. So to get that's differing from impressions, where if I tweet 100 times with 17,000 followers, it adds up every time I tweet. So getting reach is very difficult, and it's a major task, and to get 50 million is almost unheard of, even for some paid marketing campaigns. So this was all organic, and it was all the community coming together to make that happen. And it's all to raise awareness for the Dine Out, which raises funds for No Kid Hungry all month long.
So I guess, this is a good example of, you see lots of stuff about influencer marketing and the value of getting your brand ambassadors to kind of get behind something. And I think the fact that you were doing it by to get this 50 million number, not only, I remember when you first kind of told me about it, I thought you guys are definitely reaching for the stars. I think that was, I thought that was a very, large goal, but at the same time, the fact that it really just takes, simple things like, I love the message that was one tweet can help. And we often worry about all the, getting everybody involved and getting everybody to tweet a massive amount of times. And I thought it was really poignant, if you watch that hashtag on that day, how many different individual people would reach out, often to the same people. I think, Tim, you and I would reach out to someone and they're like, well, yeah, I just talked to Tim this morning about it. And I think there's a lot to be said on brands and leaders and how they kind of empower ambassadors and build kind of that influence where you're getting people. So, what was some of the thought process on how you were going to get that word out? Because it took a lot of work to get that many people to individually reach out to others.
Yeah, well, I think the biggest thing was this wasn't something that we just planned on doing and then woke up on Tuesday morning and started tweeting away. I think that's the biggest thing to remember. No Kid Hungry, like I had mentioned in my intro, we have this social council, which is about 24, volunteers that just are passionate about the cause and want to help. And so those social council members have been told about this campaign and what our goal was, and basically made a part of this team. They bought into the goal. They knew what their role was. They knew how we were going to go about executing on it months ago. And so for them to be aware of this and actually feel like they were part of the process in developing that strategy and then helping us execute on that on Tuesday was absolutely critical to making that happen. But then it was also reaching out to a lot of other individuals, and Brian, you were one of them. We looked at who do we know that has said that they're willing to support No Kid Hungry, that comes from different communities, has a different reach. We don't want everybody that works for a restaurant, just reaching out to all the same contacts. We don't want somebody in the HR space reaching out to everybody else in the HR space. We don't need somebody, that's a digital marketer just to be reaching out to the digital marketing folks. And so it was like, how can we get these, the bakers? How can we get the, the Generation X, or the Generation Y? How can we get, the people that are really active on a lot of these Twitter chat communities? How can we get people that are, that are involved in leadership? And so it was like looking at who do we know that kind of has these sphere of influences, and how we can reach out to those people. And it was, to your point, yes, you reach out to a lot of the same people that I might have reached out to, Brian, but when I asked, they might have said yes, but you were the second touch point and had a stronger relationship with them, so they actually did it when they heard from you, but they might have not done it from you if they didn't hear it from me first. And so this really, overlapping but not repetitive outreach from multiple channels, from multiple people, was really what made this effective. And it really is the power that, the voice of the community is greater than the voice of one. And that's really what we saw during Tuesday's tweet out.
Yeah, I thought that was I really, the teamwork, I was happy to be a part of it, and I think you had a couple of really good points there where it was a strategy, you had a plan. I remember when you originally reached out to me a couple of months ago about the idea, you asked for input, asked for my advice, and I did feel, as a volunteer and someone that was just willing to help out, that you were giving me a chance to help influence something that was, bigger than me, and that not only made me want to be a part of it, but I think that's a great strategy from a overall, just from, I like that we focused on Twitter chats from, like, especially from my perspective, where I participated and involved in a couple Twitter chats during the week, and I think it's because those Twitter chats are actively engaging. The people are building relationships beyond just, hey, reach out to your LinkedIn connections that you have, which might not have been anything more than the original touch point, and kind of leads perfectly into question 7, where people have questions and opinions on, hey, they want to be heard. How can a community leader amplify those community voices, in actions similar to what you've done in No Kid Hungry, as well as just in the community as a whole?
Yeah, well, I think it's really easy for us. I think sometimes it's just as simple as giving them, retweeting them, giving them a fave on one of their tweets. Sometimes it's just that individual outreach that you're just reaching out to them and thanking them directly instead of as a group or hey, everyone, we really appreciate you. But then other times it's kind of taking, to your point, I mean, we found a lot of people that wanted to volunteer and raise their hands well in advance to say that they wanted to be part of this. And so when they got to be part of it, looking at them and how we could feature them a little bit more than we're featuring most other people. And so, really paying attention to those people on a Twitter list and following what they're saying. Some of our bloggers we're actually starting to feature some of their blogs. If they're really consistent and passionate supporters and have done a lot for No Kid Hungry, we can actually feature them on the No Kid Hungry blog. Same with some of our youth advocates. And so it's really just taking a look at how we can do some simple things that don't cost a lot of money, don't take a lot of resources, and really just give that person a little bit special attention. One of the things that we did with the Social Council is we had a visit to DC where if they wanted to, they could come and meet in person, and it was the first time that we ever did this at Share Strength's office for No Kid Hungry a couple weeks before the tweet out. And one of the things I did there to let them know how much we appreciated them was I wrote handwritten individual messages just thanking everybody, not from me, but from the BTC team and from the No Kid Hungry team, just what they meant to us and thanking them for their efforts. And those people, I mean, I didn't scientifically, or analyze this yet, but I can tell you overall, just my initial vision of what happened is the people that were in that conference room in DC that got those cards were the ones that you saw for 8, 10, 12, 14 hours volunteering on Twitter on Tuesday.
So everything you're talking about, it's very tactical. So people really do need to think long-term with their building their community or nurturing their community and what they're hoping to achieve from it. So what would you recommend someone who's just starting out, like they're just at the beginning stages of growing a community? What would be the first steps?
I think I hit the button twice there. I muted myself as I started talking. I think, the real thing that I say is always be testing, and it kind of goes back to that phishing story, right? Just don't always assume. When I was at Huffington Post, I started at HuffPost Live, and our initial assumption was that the commenters on HuffPost.com would come over and want to be on-air guest on HuffPost Live to be on video. Well, we spent a couple months trying to convert people over, and we had major successes when we got our first one after 5 weeks, and then it was another like 4 weeks before we got another one. And all of a sudden, it just kind of clicked on me that, you know, we have this whole community of bloggers at Huffington Post. Why don't we tap into them as opposed to tapping into the commenters to be on-air guests? They're the ones who want to get their name out there. They want to have their face out there. And so I took those lessons and I went into a new community and tapped into a new community, and all of a sudden we started seeing massive results in a shorter period of time. So it's all about testing small, taking learnings from those testings that you do and going on. But I think the biggest thing when you're really looking to grow a community and you want to find the people that can become your advocates and really get involved is learn early how you separate the players from the sayers, because there's so many people that will raise their hand and say they want to help, but the people that actually will is a completely different story.
That's funny that you say that, because I think you were on my Facebook query. I put out that kind of note where I feel oftentimes we get we have to balance, you know, how much we're giving to people and what value we're providing. Because for me, I have a lot of people that say they want to work with me, but when it comes down to actually working with me, that's a different thing. And I love that idea of you have to kind of divide who they are. And I think understanding that you have to do that, but also that doesn't mean if they are a sayer, they can't eventually turn into one of the doers and people that kind of work. So I think you had a couple really good comments on that, and you know, I know Ted Rubin kind of inquired in it as well, and that I think is a big piece. I think is it Roy? Roy's from Huffington Post. You know, I saw him speak live at the Digital Summit here in Phoenix, Arizona, and he had some amazing things on his. You know, he kept saying engagement mattered. Everything he was kind of talking to. I'm looking for a couple of the quote graphics that I made during his session, because I thought it was interesting how Huffington Post Live really took the idea and said, hey, we're going to give the power to the community. The people that are watching are now going to be, you know, kind of what we're amplifying, and that's by far was the unique way of doing it back then. I still think it's unique, even as, you know, video and such kind of grow. So when you guys were dividing the, you know, those who say and those that are actually doing, how do you kind of manage that for someone that's trying to manage that in their contacts and engagement?
Yeah, well, I mean, you can really get fancy and go out and get some some software that analyzes people and do all that. You can use CRM systems to help manage those contacts. But for me, the best and truest and easiest way, because everybody's system is different, the way that, you know, what your needs are going to be different than my needs, my notes are going to be different than your notes, is just start collecting a spreadsheet and keeping track of those people. It's not going to be a huge number because we're not talking about everybody in your community. We're just talking about the people that really can become your advocates or have the potential to become your advocates. And so really just start looking at who does what, who can go where, and then start seeing when you ask, are they responding? Are they doing what you've asked of them? And it's real easy to start checking people off if they're not providing for you. One of the things that I've always said, and another thing that you need to be careful of, because it's not only identifying those people, but then once you get people that are interested, you don't want to lose them because they come bored in doing what they're doing. And so it's all looking at this, you know, vest and elevate strategy that I talk about. You get somebody vested in what you're doing in the community, and then you learn when they get to that threshold point when you can elevate them up to the next level. So if you're growing a community, you might not need, you know, to have somebody that runs individual forums or to become moderators for individual forums or to be your greeter for other people coming in. But as you grow, you might need that. And so the one person that's always been the most engaging with you might play very well into one of those roles, and you can elevate them up to that and not have them get too bored or fizzle out with their efforts that they're doing for you if you just keep them doing the same thing overall. And so it's really just looking at how you can get them vested to start with, and then how you elevate them once you and them get to a certain stage.
And I think we have a kind of a question that kind of goes in the same thing, because I think this is a common question that I often get whenever I'm talking community or with CMGR Hangout on Fridays that, you know, I participate in. There's lots of people that talk about, okay, we understand that, but when it comes to, and this is from Andrew Jenkins, one of our guests of previous, and he said, can you have a vibrant yet balanced community when only a few speak but many listen? And I think that's a great question. I'd love to hear your insight.
Sure you can, as long as those few are balanced. That's that's the key, right? It's who those people are. And if you're building the community, it's your role to really help make sure that you identify the right people to be those few. And you don't want to wait it. And this is one thing I learned to my detriment early on, was I was surrounding myself with people that were just like me. The problem with that was I wasn't getting differing opinions. I wasn't challenging where we needed to go, because I was only looking at things by people that were saying yes, 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 we agree, we agree, we agree. We call them yes men. Well, those are also yes men is derogatory. People that that think the same way as you and that you enjoy being around, those are the yes men. And you got to be careful that you don't fill your community with too many people that are saying the same thing. Otherwise, you will just turn into a singular focused community instead of a very diverse and vibrant community. Even though you only have a few people talking, the people that are listening is going to be so much greater if you have a diverse set of opinions coming from those few.
So there's a lot of talk about community versus tribe. What do you think the main differences are between having, let's say, a vibrant community and a tribe, which I think Andrew's question kind of leads into that. So if you have, a lot of low men on the totem pole that are happy to follow direction, but
yeah, I kind of like this, and I really haven't written about this yet, but I've been involved in some conversations with some people about this, is I get what tribes are. Tribes sound good. There's a whole book around it by a great author and somebody that I'm not gonna bash what they wrote. But the more I hear people use the word tribes, the more it makes the hair on the back of my neck stick up. And that's because tribes are inclusive. They're niche, and they're so closed-celled. If you walked up to a tribe and you were an outsider, you would have a very hard time feeling part of that tribe. In a community, you can just step into that community at any point in time and be able to feel like you're there on the same level as anybody else. And so I do think tribes have a place, just like networks have a place, but I think when we're looking at communities, we want to make communities as open and as inviting, and also as open for people to leave if they don't want to be there. The whole sense of community is not who you know, it's why you're there.
That's great. I was really interested in your insights on that, because I think I often talk about, we were talking about not having the same person as yourself, and I like that Confucius saying where you don't know what you don't know, and I like to find people that don't know what I don't know, so that I get an inclusive conversation going. But one of the other things I've kind of realized is when we talk tribes or we talk areas, as communities grow and we use social that is globally around the world, I think it's also important not only to have different types of people, but people that are geographically spread out and also kind of connect at different areas. I have been doing a lot of stuff, and I call it tweet when you sleep, but the amount of people that I've engaged and met in Australia, the PAC region, the Middle East, and that stay up late at night to even participate in a chat like this, I think that's amazing, and it's because it is an open opportunity. People can jump into a chat or jump into a community, and it is definitely a different aspect than tribes. I love that, because I think you also kind of talk about the exclusivity of a community, wanting people to know that if you are going to participate, you have a chance to have a voice, but you also have to be, you want to be there, rather than oftentimes a network is just someone that they hook you on and you kind of stick with that. Hopefully I wasn't paraphrasing too much.
No, but I do think it's important to remember. I mean, your community has the potential, and you want to reach a global audience, right? You want to be connected with people around the world. With No Kid Hungry, we're focused on childhood hunger in America. So it's not that people from Canada or Mexico or Europe or Australia can't help with what we're trying to do here, but it's probably not as personal and as impactful for them if it doesn't affect them in their backyard. So our audience is very much, with No Kid Hungry, U.S. focused. Not to say that we don't have supporters in other parts of the world. When I start looking at doing what I'm doing with Stories.NYC, Stories from the Street, it's a New York City focus. So it's people that work and live in New York City, not the rest of the country, not the rest of the world. And so my focus will be much smaller on the community that I'm growing there. when I ran and founded My Community Manager, it was really with the whole purpose of what you were talking about, is connecting with people all over the world. And even earlier this year for Community Manager Appreciation Day, we had people on our 24-hour hangout joining from Australia, Hong Kong, France, Germany, Chile. I mean, you name it. We had people from all over the world. And I think those differing opinions really taught me a lot about how to manage communities, because the way people talk about community management in Europe is much different than the way we talk about it here in the US. And so, when you start seeing and becoming aware of those differences, it doesn't make them wrong and you right. It just gives you a better understanding and appreciation of how you can communicate with those people. And that's the real key, right? It all comes down to communication, and communication is a cornerstone for how we build relationships.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. I remember, I think it was David Hurley had said on one of the CMGR Hangouts when we were talking about tribe and kind of community, and was like, oftentimes the greatest community manager is one that is not often seen or heard, where in a tribe, the chief is the one that's always seen and heard. And I thought that was a great way. Like, when he said that, I was like, oh, it's, as simple as it sounds, it does really resonate, especially, those communities that I'm a part of. I often will know who the community manager is, but will go long periods of time without directly engaging with them, since I'm, no surprise, I'm not afraid to be boisterous on my own, and I don't need the kickstart oftentimes on that side. So I think this is a good one from when we think about online and offline. I know you call it living, which I love, and I remember when you told me about, it's not a work-life balance, you're just living, and we don't get time back. So when we talk about offline events and connecting online and offline, I like going both directions, not just one. What do you consider like the importance, and how you kind of bridge those gaps? Because I'm sure with the New York focus creating is going to have a little bit more offline events than you would have when you were Team No Cut Hungry and kind of doing a more global scale.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't think there's any substitute for meeting face to face. I mean, you get certain emotions, certain reactions, you get touch. I mean, touching somebody, feeling somebody, and I don't mean this in an intimate way, I don't mean this in a sexual way. It's that pure handshake. It's that hug that you give somebody. It's just putting their hand on their back when they tell you a story, or you're congratulating them. You can't get that through any other digital medium. And I'm talking going back to the phone. So, I mean, there's nothing that will replace that. But what we can do is exactly what we're doing here, right? If we can't meet face-to-face because of our challenges of geography, then let's get on a video call, a live video stream, and actually have this communication. Because what this does is, even though we can't smell each other and we can't touch each other, we can make sure that we're present for each other. We can look into each other's eyes. We can start to understand that Rachel's looking at another screen right now and not me, so I didn't mean to call you out. I know you're multitasking, but that's what we wouldn't get that on email. We don't get that on Twitter. We don't get that even on a phone call, because how many times are you on a phone call, put yourself on mute, and are chatting with somebody? The person on the other line has no idea that you're multitasking. And I love this because, like, I'm not saying it's going to happen. It could happen. If my wife walked home from work right now and walked right behind me right here, you guys would all know that something was going on behind me. Or if I was on the phone, I'd just mute it, and she'd walk by, and nobody would know that my situation had changed at all, and my focus might be completely different because now I got her out of the corner of my eye. And so that's what live, creating in-person events are great. Creating these situations where we have that almost live situation, because we have to become present for each other on live video, is the second best. But then just hearing our voices is so much more powerful than a written word. And so if you can pick up the telephone and call somebody, don't just send them an email, don't just send them a tweet, don't post on Facebook. Pick up the phone and hear their voice and let them hear yours. Those are the ways that you build relationships, even if you're not having the opportunity to get together in person.
No, and I think that's. I mean, I think I said it on the hangout we were on last week, where I said, I like to look at someone in their digital eyeballs, and as someone that I believe in nonverbal cues, and I am one that multitasks. So I actually am writing a blog on multitasking, and it basically came from someone kind of asking, well, how do you do that? And one of the things that I started laughing about was that I multitask. I multitask at live events as well, offline, tweeting. But that offline multitasking is also taking a step down, right? So I think it's kind of like you had said, when we're on a conference call, Lord knows what we could be doing. I'll be watching football, feet up, instant messaging with people, tweeting, and when you're visually with the video, you kind of take that next step where you're having a much more active, engaged conversation. But I'm also, tweeting out and creating graphics, and then we take it the next step in that offline, in person. And the nonverbal cue side, when we play poker, I always tell people that like the number one tell for any person at a poker table is their feet. And that often blows people's mind. And you can't tell someone's feet. I can't see where your feet are positioned in this conversation, but depending on your feet position depends on your active engagement in my conversation. And if we're not face to face, I'm missing that angle for what I love to kind of look at for scaling how I talk, or if I talk too much. So I think that's a huge. We talk about the importance of offline and online. I think bridging the two is of great value. But I think you connected right there. It's that. The things that you limit or you do less of when you're on and we've all seen the conference call video that was who knows what people are doing when they're on conference calls, that's for sure.
When I think I was just going to kind of just add another thought on that. I mean, we've been talking a lot about relationships and trust, and there's no better way to build relationships through trust better than having personal communication with one other person. I mean, that's where it really comes into play. And so, a lot of people might laugh or diminish the fact because it's so easy just to send an instant message. It's so easy to send that email. It's so easy just to tweet somebody. But the next time you think about doing that to somebody that you want to be a valued member of your community, think about picking up the phone or inviting them to a Google Hangout or a Skype call next time and see the impact that has. I challenge you to do that. This is one thing I've been doing on people's birthdays. I don't do it to every single person, but I do it with anybody a happy birthday on Facebook. If I want to wish them a happy birthday, I will pick up the phone and call them. And the impact that has had on the people that I am calling, I cannot tell you the things that I have heard, that I've been the only other person. I've been the only person, not even their mom has called some of these people, or I might be the only person outside of their mom that has called to wish them a happy birthday. Now you think of that compared to the hundreds of people wishing you happy birthday on Facebook. Who do you think sticks out, the hundreds of people or me? And the person.
I love that. 'Cause I do the same thing with even the cross networking, because like Facebook's the one that tells us it's your birthday, but if I always communicate with a person on LinkedIn, I message them on LinkedIn, or it happened earlier, I guess it was this weekend, I text messaged someone that I hadn't talked to on text or phone and said, happy birthday, would love to chat, and they reply back and it's like, this is the first text message I've got from you on my new phone. I've had that phone for 2 years. And so they noticed that I didn't just do the blanket Facebook message, and I think that's kind of key. And I think, Rachel, you have a question from the Twitter chat side?
Yeah, we actually have two good questions. So the first one comes from our friend Greg from Linking to Sales. He's asking, what about community and audience? Would you agree both have fundamentally different missions?
Absolutely. Audience is anybody that can hear your message or that you want to potentially reach, and a community is somebody that you want to reach that is passionate and has an interest in the purpose of your message. And if you find those people, they're very different than just anybody that you can potentially reach and hear or see your message.
I agree. Let's see. The second question came from Eva. Can Tim give some examples of the community differences between the U.S. and Europe?
Oh, sure. I will say by and large.
Also, I have another chat that I host, and it's based purely in Europe, so I'm very curious to see what your answers are here.
Well, I've confirmed this with a few people that have worked both here and in Europe, and they both confirm, but this goes back a year or so ago, so it might have changed a little bit. But I would say overall the primary difference is people in Europe tend to think of communities as visitors to your website. So they're more involved in SEO, they're more involved in conversions on your site, they're more involved in traffic to your website. Whereas in the US, it's really not a function of those things. We might be tied in with those things, but it's really about the engagement we get off of our website or through our website as opposed to just the conversions we make on our website.
I think that kind of goes back to the beginning part where you kind of, I thought, hit a really big part on saying that, like, you're not anti-networks and you understand the importance of networks in so many different areas, because I think oftentimes I talk about, and I'm coaching someone, I'm talking about building their network, and then I'm talking about engaging with the community, and I'm thinking of two different strategies, two different goals is usually how I attack it, because I think of a lot of times when people think of one or the other, they're thinking that it's an either, you only can do one, and for me it's about, utilizing, because we all know that, you're going to have people you're going to connect with that you don't engage with, especially, in the world of LinkedIn. Everybody just kind of sends you the "you're a person I trust," not a canned LinkedIn message, and that's your network. And I question that if it's even a network at that point. But for me, I always thought of, like, the network are the people that of my work, my life, of throughout my career, of people that I've worked with that I've stayed in touch with. But the community of people are the ones that I actively engage. They know that I could reach out to them if I needed something. I would kind of need to go further. So I think one of the questions here, it's like, when we talk about community and marketing or community and sales, what's the future of community? Is it, we talk about how social media, it won't be the word social anymore because it's really just the way that we're going to interact. I'm curious, how do you kind of see the future of community as we have here? Question 10 minutes left. 10 minutes left.
Yeah, no, I don't look at it as the future of marketing. I think it's the past, present, and future of marketing. I mean, communities have always been at the forefront of what marketing is. Marketing is, how do you get your message to as many people as possible? And that's all been through communities. Yes, we didn't have a way to track that and to measure it as quickly or as accurately as we do today. But when you put your billboard up, you knew how many cars you went by, you knew how many people went through, and then you can convert that to the people that were buying products in your store off of your shelves. And that was word of mouth, because it wasn't just you going home and after you saw that on a billboard and then buying that product at the store. It was you talking to your neighbors about what you did. It was you going to school or to your kids' sports games and telling them about that. That has not changed. That is the same thing. And communities are built around that. The way that we're talking about this more now is we have a way to harness this. We have a way to start measuring and effectively using it. And that comes through being able to communicate with these people on a much quicker and in real-time way that we're able to with digital. And so for me, it's not about changing it. It's really about just looking at how we can actually show the return that we're getting on that, how we can show how quickly this message is spreading, and more importantly, how we can start building relationships with the right people when our people in our community start sharing that message and we see other people start engaging with us. That is the most powerful thing I think that I saw from Tuesday's tweet out. Was it wasn't just the amount of people that actually tweeted out, it was the amount of people that were reaching out to us saying, this is fantastic, how can I get involved further? And when you have people coming to you asking you that, imagine that, and this is another difference I don't think that I've said so far, the difference between networks and communities is communities. This is a very emotional thing. This is an emotional transaction. These people are not doing this because you're paying them money or compensating them for their time. They're doing it because they're passionate and they believe in what you're trying to achieve. I don't care if you're a nonprofit or a for-profit brand. They believe in what you're trying to do. That's why they're there. It's emotional connection. A network is very transactional. So the second you stop compensating me, the second we stop working together, our relationship is changed based upon that transaction that we had in place at that moment. And that's where the real power of community comes in. And I think from marketing standpoint, if you start looking at people that are passionate, I know most marketers get scared out of their pants because it's like, oh my gosh, emotional people, what if they get mad? What if they say the wrong thing? What if they do that? I'll turn that around and say, if you have the right community and have enabled them to have access to the right information and kept them feeling like they were insiders into what you're trying to achieve, what's going to happen when you have a crisis, when somebody goes rogue on you, is your community is going to be responding before your PR and your legal team is going to come up with a response to put out there. And who do you think the public is going to believe? The brand or your passionate community members that are out there saying good things on behalf of your brand? And so this is where the power of those emotional connections that you get with a community, the passionate members of your community, can really help benefit an organization.
No, I think one of the things I give credit from what you were saying there is telling your story. You shared the passion and gave me a reason to be passionate about it. I probably have 5 to 10 different people or groups that ask for a retweet, or Brian, can you support me for this? And I think you did it yesterday. I thought it was funny because I did the same. We almost had the exact same response because someone asked, hey, can you retweet this for this great cause? Well, they didn't have the link of the cause. It just had a picture, and we both kind of replied back, well, what's the cause that we're retweeting this for? And I thought No Kid Hungry did an amazing job of telling the story, giving me a reason to believe. I've participated along the way because you've kind of brought me along the way. You've always shared the story, and I think that's every brand could really learn from that idea, because it's you share your story, you shared your passions, you shared why it makes sense. I mean, you're giving data, but you're not giving data that I can't relate to. I have 3 small daughters. You tell me that 1 out of 5 kids are going to bed hungry. I look at my house every night and go, how can I be someone that doesn't want to actively change that? And I think we have to think of that from brands. We have to think about that from sales engagement. So I love that. The key there is the story and content.
I just need to say one thing, and if anybody takes one thing away from what you just said, when did Brian, if you're listening to this, when did Brian at one time throughout that whole thing say what he heard from No Kid Hungry? 0. It was what he heard from me and other people in the community. It wasn't what he heard from the branded account. It was what he heard from the community's accounts. That is the power of communities right there.
Bingo. I love it. All right. That's spot on, Tim. And I not only appreciate your insights, but I always said that you're one of the must follows on social and across the board, as I know that you're not automating or just sharing anything and everything. If you're putting something out there, it has great meaning and value, and I think that's something that is kind of lost on a lot of leaders and influencers that are out there today in social, is that they're just they think that it's the sheer amount of things that they get out is the value, not really when you tweet or when you message something, it's it's something that I'm going to pay attention to. And I think that's another example, and the fact that you're willing to jump on Hangouts and talk to Rachel and I and kind of share with this community. Especially, I know you even have a little bit more of a biz dev role in your aspect now, so you even have the social selling aspect of empowering a community really means you're living and doing it on a daily basis, which I think is extremely important. We've had a great time. Community's been really all about different things going on in our chat, lots of tweetables. I'm going to make sure to loop those out. Rachel, do we have any other questions from the community coming out there, or any final comments?
I think the last few tweets that have caught my eye have just been incredibly positive. Like Jacob Curtis giving a shout out to Tim. Very articulate, dropping bombs. I mean, I think everyone's definitely agreeing with what Brian is saying. You're practicing what you preach, which is unfortunately uncommon, but it's really inspiring. So it's been a huge honor to have you today.
Well, thank you, and I will say that, I mean, we've talked a couple times about how can you effectively start something up. This isn't something I decided to do yesterday. The whole involvement with me personally with No Kid Hungry has been over a year now, and a good friend of mine that runs Pangeo Coffee, Jeff Power, when I was telling him the story about how this had changed over the year, that people used to like and retweet me a couple times when I shared something about No Kid Hungry, to today it's people like Brian that want to get involved. It's people that creating their own posts, their own fundraisers, because they hear how passionate it is for me, and they've made their own connection. And he said, Tim, they're feeling your heartbeat, and people feel your heartbeat over time. They don't feel that overnight.
Bam, right there. We'll leave it with that. Social Selling Hour is a wrap for this September 15th. Thank you, everybody on Twitters and watching on Google+, and those of you that will be soon watching on YouTube as the recap. Once again, thank you, everybody. We'll be here, same bat channel, same bat time next week. # Social Selling Hour. We will see you next week. Thanks again.
Thanks, guys.